Hello, folks. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and I have yet another great show planned for us. But while we wait for, we're going to be looking at
folks.
Wildman.
Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris.
We're going to be looking at Wildman tonight, okay? But while we wait for people to gather in the chat, let me go off and show you some artwork off for my own upcoming graphic novel, Scumdogs. Here's my Extreme 90s cover. Looks pretty good, huh? This has pretty much all the characters in my graphic novel on it. Scumdogs, the name of my book, is a parody book. I parody cartoons. Now, the Scumdogs themselves, the title characters, they're villains who are out to take over the world. They're basically a parody of various villains from 80s cartoons. Let's see. See, in the future, there's such a thing known as the Scumdog Sports. It's basically superhuman sporting events. Only they use superhumanly powerful monsters who are the athletes. They get these powers to compete in this, they trade in their humanity to get superpowers to compete in the Scumdog Sports. So that's why they're called Scum Dogs. They're scum and dogs for trading in their humanity. They're using science or some other method where they become superhumanly powerful monsters. Now, my main characters are Deathmug and Buick Starpoon. Deathmug is the leader of the Scumdogs, and he's out to rule the world. He's a former pro athlete who was banned from sports along with the other members of the Scumdogs, so he decided to take over the world. He's a parody of various villains from 80s cartoons. So Deathmug is the purple guy with the metal skull mask, and Buick Starpoon is the guy with the pink pompadour hair. Deathmug is a parody of Cobra Commander from G.I. Joe because he's got a metal mask, and he's also a parody of Serpentor from G.I. Joe because he's got gold on him. And he's purple like the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. While Buick Starpoon is a G.I. Joe parody. He's a parody of Duke from G.I. Joe, which means he has a military specialty. Because he's a parody of, because G.I. Joes have a military specialty. They're that made them basically be part of G.I. Joe. Buick Starpoon is also a parody of the space hero character as well, like Buzz Lightyear or Buck Rogers, those kinds of characters. Notice the uniform he's wearing. Anyone on this cover with a similar uniform to him is part of his team in the Space Forces. Now, Buick Starpoon's specialty is that he's a captain. He captains a starship with his crew. Now, over here, this guy with a mohawk, his name is Roadhog. His military specialty is that he's an army guy. While this bald guy, this guy down here who's bald with a gun, see him right there, the guy right there, his name is Beach Pounder. His military specialty is that he's a Marine. While this guy back here in the red uniform firing his weapons, the guy in that vehicle there, his name is Blast Tank. He's a heavy vehicle specialist, a tanker. So you get the idea. And you see this cover here. It's one of 3 different variant covers you'll be able to back when my Indiegogo goes live. Over here, we're going to look at Girl Friday. Girl Friday is the second command to the Wild Rangers. That's the name of Buick Starpoon's team in the Space Forces. Girl Friday was put on the Wild Rangers because while the Wild Rangers, go and save the day from the Scumdogs, they're just highly destructive idiots that destroy everything in sight. So to cut down on that, her superiors in the Space Forces assigned Girl Friday as the second in command to Buick Starpoon, helping him with his team. She's basically there to babysit them and make sure they don't do too much damage to the surrounding area. And she hates her job. She hates Buick Starpoon. She thinks her career in the military is over because she's now a babysitter. That's Girl Friday. Now we'll look at these are Deathmug's henchmen because, in all 80s cartoons, the main villain of the cartoon, his henchmen, the guys he gets to do his bidding, they'd be total idiots. And these are Deathmug's idiots. Well, maybe I should say my idiots. The blue guy with the top hat is Murdermouth, and the pink guy down here is Sloppy. There are a couple of idiots that can't do anything right, love their jobs, and basically destroy everything in sight. Here we have another of the Scumdogs. Hair Metal Doctor. Hair Metal Doctor is basically a parody of Dr. Mindbender from G.I. Joe, who's a mad scientist. My mad scientist is also crossed over with a hair metal rocker, because I thought that'd be awesome to have him on the Scumdogs. He thinks of all the mad gadgets and machines the Scumdogs use to take over the world. Hair Metal Doctor. And now we're going to look at Miss Breasty Melons, who's basically a parody of the Baroness from G.I. Joe. But unlike the Baroness, she's a party girl who wants to have fun. She became a villain because she thought it'd be cool or nice. Now, the Hair Metal Doctor pinup and the Miss Breasty Melons pinup will be included with other pinups in my graphic novel when you back it on Indiegogo. Oh, and I will also get these pinups out to you on T-shirts as well as soon as I'm able to make them. Looked at that. All right, let me exit out of these, and we're going to be looking at Wildman tonight, huh? We're going to be looking at Wildman stories, basically Bigfoot stories, but not just Bigfoot. There are different. Basically, he's a Bigfoot, Bigfoot's appeared all over the world. Some places he's known as the rock ape, and other places the skunk ape, or basically the abominable snowman. So we're going to be looking at those stories tonight, folks. I figured I'd look at different types of Bigfoot, looking like that. I thought it'd be cool. So while we wait for people to, let's see if anyone's hit that like button for me. Well, yeah. Let's see. If you have not hit that like button yet, folks, please do so. It really helps me fight the algorithm. Let's see. The mysterious rock apes of the Vietnam War. All right. Let's go right here. War brings with it not only stories of death and struggle, but also those of mystery. Beyond all of the fighting and tales of battle of valor, there often seem to be other more enigmatic phenomenon lurking in the background. Some of the most mysterious, weirdest things seem to pop up in the remote battlefields of the earth, from unexplained phenomena to ghostly happenings. To strange beasts, war can be a wellspring of high strangeness. The Vietnam War was no different, and among the fighting amidst the humid, mosquito-choked jungles, American GIs began to come back with tales of something weirder than the enemy lurking in the forests. They also talked about, in the Vietnam War, people encounter our soldiers in Vietnam encountering aliens as well. And it seemed like the Viet Cong were not the only things to watch out for in the dense underbrush. Here, the foreign soldiers would come face to face with a creature that was well known by the locals, yet new to them, a humanoid, hairy biped, the likes of which none of them had ever seen, which would lurch forth from the deepest jungles to startle or even attack, and which would come to be known as the rock apes. Before fighting started in the jungles of Vietnam, there had long been stories of something strange lurking in the remote areas here. Various people of the jungles choked interiors of Vietnam. Borneo, in particular, within the Vu Quang National Reserve, have a rich tradition of the stories of a biped, hairy, ape-like creature known as various names. Nij or Nigurong, also known as Nogurong, or jungle people. These jungle people are said to be around 1.8 meters, 6 feet tall, stout, very muscular, with protruding stomachs, and covered in their ranging form brown to black in color, except for their knees, the soles of the feet, the hands, and the face, which remain bare, although they inhabit isolated remote jungle areas. The Nairobi, something that are reported to be rather bold and aggressive, especially a variety from Borneo, which will apparently attack humans without thinking twice about it. They are said to travel in troops and are most active at dusk or during the night. The locals of these regions consider these creatures to be merely a fact of life, but the Brutut was not really known to the outside world until war began to impede into their domain. During the days when troops toiled and fought in clouds of mosquito-clouded jungle, dodging enemy bullets and hiking relentlessly through the humid, oppressive heat, there would be numerous reports from soldiers of strange creatures prowling the forest that were neither human nor ape, and would come to be known as the rock apes. Accounts of encountering these creatures seem to have been commonplace throughout the Vietnam War from both sides of the conflict. In many cases, the strange beasts were mistaken for enemy troops, only to startle soldiers when they actually seen up close. The most well-known depth published account of these enigmatic creatures from a book by a veteran named Craig Jurgensen called, Crazy Jai Strange But True Stories of the Vietnam War. The account describes the ordeal of 6 men unit from 101st Airborne Division who were taking a break after a relentless hike through the unforgiving mountainous jungle terrain, carrying heavy packs. Even as they rested, they were attuned to the surrounding environment. They aware that the Viet Cong were everywhere. They could strike at any moment. As the units sat there resting, exhausted in their sweat-soaked fatigue, some trees located around 15 yards uphill then reportedly began shaking violently, and it was assumed that it was the enemy. The soldiers prepared their weapons and trained an eye on the suspicious trees as they sat in wait, and mosquitoes buzzing around their heads. The creeping, sickening dread of the coming battle weighing heavily on their minds. It was then noticed that an oblong head, face covered in reddish hair, possessing a huge mouth, dark, deep-set eyes, had emerged from the bush. The startled soldiers then witnessed a strange creature step from the underbrush, reveal a 5-foot-tall, muscular frame developed in the same matted reddish hair. After which it stood there on 2 legs, it seemingly carefully scrutinized the men. The soldiers then speculated that it may be a large orangutan, before one of them pointed out that the orangutan were not native to Vietnam, and as they argued over what it could be, the strange beast purportedly lost interest in them and quietly slinked back off into the jungle. One of the 1968 account from a jungle veteran, Robert Brad's diary, describes an incident in which his unit began hearing inexplicable noises. The outer perimeter of their camp, late at night, not knowing if what they were hearing that was normal, jungle life, or the enemy of Mexican-American corporal, took it upon himself to go out to investigate in the evening. Pancho determinedly marched up the hill to the communications bunker to see what was going on. When the corporal was on his way back, he was witnessed to let off several short bursts of fire from his weapon before hurrying back to camp in a somewhat unsettled state. Almost immediately, the unit's lieutenant had been on the radio demanding to know who was firing and what. When Pancho reached the camp, he excitedly related, had been walking back and had noticed a bush that had not been there before. When he had leaned down to take a look at it, it had been allegedly snorted at him, causing him to panic and fire, would later say. What he had encountered was the unambiguous rock ape of Vietnam. I would come to learn that they were nearly everywhere and quite fearless. That is what we had heard, the wire that night. In another encounter in 1969, a patrol was caught off guard by enemy fire, after which everyone took cover. It was then that something strange made its presence known to one of the group. The witness was laying there, avoiding getting shot. There was a figure that broke out of the thick vegetation, which first seemed to be a large man, but as it ran past, it was clear that it was something else altogether. The figure was described being around 7 feet in height, impressively built, and mostly covered with reddish hair. Whatever it was moved extremely quickly, was then caught by some bullets in the crossfire, after which it stumbled but didn't go down. It was then that the enemy began yelling something to each other excitedly that the witness could not understand, before running off with one of the enemy, even leaving his weapon behind in a panicked haste. The American patrol regrouped and headed to a more secure area. That night, they were assaulted by a barrage of strange animalistic noises from the night, like whines, barks, howls. The next day, some of the patrol requested permission to go investigate what had been and seen and heard the previous day, and as this search was underway, they came across an enemy soldier that seemed to have been viciously torn apart. The patrol was so disturbed by the gruesome sight, they ran back to their base by the hill, and one of the witnesses would later say, "The rest of the time we were in Vietnam, I never heard the sounds or saw anything like it again. The talk of what we had seen spread very quickly. Some of the locals called it a name that I had neither pronounced nor remember. The translation, if I recall, was stench monkey or foul monkey, something like that. I remember for sure. What I do know is that it bothered me so much that I transferred from there to a job on a helicopter so that I wouldn't have to be in the jungle anymore." Some of the rock ape accounts are truly dramatic and frightening. One such account by Michael Kelly, Co. of 101st 502nd Infantry, the 101st Airborne Division. Not one rock ape, but hundreds of them. In one account in 1969, 8 of the strange creatures came casually walking up a trail of a ridge, new, surprised by a platoon that was in the middle of having lunch. When they turned a ridge about 10 meters from there, the men were situated. According to Kelly, the platoon at first immediately thought they were Viet Cong. All hell broke loose. The squad of men opened up on M16s, 79s, and grenade launchers, lining up the forest in a vicious display of booming firepower, flying pieces of vegetation. Kelly himself was rather at the far end of a clearing, 50 meters from where the barrage of continuous shooting had started. Then he grabbed a weapon to run to join them, along with a platoon sergeant, taking cover under a topped tree. All right. For a few moments, Kelly and the platoon sergeant, hidden in the for a few minutes, Kelly, hidden by the cacophony of gunfire erupted everywhere. They finally gave each other the nod to engage. They popped out from behind the tree, ready to see a sizable enemy force descending upon them. Judging by the non-stop barrage of relentless gunfire, what they saw instead of was a platoon firing upon ghostly images, more swishing through bushes and trees all around them. Mysterious intruders were described as being 5 feet and a half feet tall. All but one was light brown to reddish brown in color. Other was almost black, was a particularly aggressive large, which reportedly rushed at the men through the thick underbrush, snarling with teeth bared. Throughout the frightening encounter, the ape-like beasts reportedly made sounds that sounded exactly like dogs. Then the creatures, whatever they were, abruptly melted away into the forest, disappearing as if they had never been there. The surprised platoon regained their composure. They searched the ground, smoked permeated area, found no sign of any dead bodies of the animals. Dead bodies of the animals. Well, dead bodies of the animals. And not even any fur or blood. Kelly would remark on what happened. This may sound very strange to you, but although I had no or little concern about killing the enemy, the killing of innocent animals turned my stomach and could enrage me if done without being a necessity. But I searched sight, but found not a drop of blood, which totally amazed me, given the amount of firing that had gone on. I wonder if to this day if the men were shooting just to scare the rock apes away, or whether they were really just poor marksmen. The men who suffered the surprise looked a bit worse for wear, and I'm sure a few had to wash their shouts out as a result of the unwelcome visit. It really scared the crap out of them. The short of mass congregation of rock apes was apparently not an isolated incident. In another shocking account, another platoon was overrun by a large number of the creatures. 1966, highly strategic location known as Hill 868, Quang Nam, had allegedly been the site of a battle between the Marines, a large group of rock apes. In the account, Marines operating in the area called the captain to report movement in the bush, which they believed to be a large force of Viet Cong headed their way. The captain then radioed back, saying that they should stay in place and that no one was to fire in order to not give away their position. Patrol soon radioed back to say that it had turned out. Which they believe to be a large force. Which they believe to be a large force headed their way. The captain then radioed back saying that they should stay in place. In order to give away their location, the patrol radioed back to say that if it had turned out that it was not Viet Cong after all, but rather a large group of hairy bipedal humanoids all around them, the Marine patrol was commanded, again, did not open fire, but instead to throw rocks at the creatures to scare them away. This would prove to be unwise, as the rock apes then began hurling rocks back with great force. While they were screaming and growling all around them in the jungle, and estimated hundreds of them. Despite the assault of rocks, numerous requests for permission to open fire, the Marines were nevertheless told not to shoot, rather to use bayonets instead. Shortly after, the captain could hear screaming and screams of pain from both Marine and ape alike over the radio, well as the frantic measures were going hand to hand. Shortly after that, the hill erupted in a roar of gunfire, screams and screaming. When the captain sent men to go investigate, the war-torn area was found to be littered with injured men, as well as allegedly the bloodied bodies of several of the mysterious rock apes. No Marines had died, but several were seriously injured and had to be evacuated by helicopter. The alleged battle became so infamous that it was called the Battle of it was called a weird battle. Hills 868 became known among the men, infested with rock apes. that were called Monkey Mountain. 68 members of the Mike Company, the 3rd Battalion, the 5th Marines, operating Hill 868, apparently had often came across a plentiful of physical evidence of the creatures. There are such as droppings, tufts of fur, or footprints, as well as hearing their eerie barks and cries at night. When the rock apes even occasionally assaulted men with rocks lobbed from the jungle, the apes were described as throwing like girls, but with velocity, and men were reported as being often seriously injured by the hurled stone projectiles. In one account given by a veteran named Steve Canyon, unit of Marines was out in the jungle 868 night testing out a new muzzle flash and noise suppressor for the weapon. As they were settling up, they suddenly noticed a rock ape glaring at them from the thick vegetation, reportedly completely unafraid. After a few moments staring at the soldiers, the creature was said to then let out a sound like a bark of a dog. A few of the men threw a rock at it to scare it away, and it hit dead on, after which they picked up a rock in its own and hurled it at them. It was then noticed that there were more of the rock apes gathering around in the jungle, around 20 of them, which will begin screaming, howling, and throwing rocks at the frightened men in unison, at the soldiers. Despite the threatening situation, the unit did not open fire, instead making a hasty retreat. When asked later why they did not shoot at the creatures, they said, "I don't know, it didn't seem right, but those apes started to come at us, and we ran as fast as we could, and we didn't stop until we were out of the jungle." Encounters with rock apes, so numerous and alarming that the North Vietnamese even mounted expeditions to go out and find evidence of them. According to Craig P.J. Jones's book, Crazy G.I. Strange But True Stories, The Vietnam War, 74, the North Vietnamese partly secretariat ordered a scientific expedition to find solid evidence of rock apes. Professor Vu Coy, the Vietnam National University, was chosen to conduct the investigation. While they did so, not see any of the beasts, they did find some curious tracks in the remote jungle. A cast was made of one of the footprints, which was sent to the analyze and was found to be wider than a human print, too large to be that of an ape. Other expeditions followed up on the find, including one led by the North Vietnamese General Hong Minh, but were unsuccessful. Mysteriously, this was not the first time footprints of the mysterious creatures had been found. In 70, a Dr. John McKinnon, he said he found tracks of the creatures, believed them to be hominid origin, perhaps similar to the Microthopilus, which locals said came from a creature called the Butut. The tracks were described as having human-looking toes, but being around the size of those of of a black bear, which are not very native to Vietnam. McKinnon wrote in his findings in 1978 in his book, In Search of the Red Ape, he would never find any definitive proof that the rock ape or Ning Rung or Ningo or the rock ape ever existed. McKinnon would nevertheless discover several new species of, or should I say Bigfoot, ever existed. McKinnon would nevertheless discover several new species of large mammal in the Viet Cong Mountain rainforest in 1992, demonstrating that the region was more than capable of hiding large new species. And another report from Army Reporter 27 April 19. Back in 1970. Army Reporter. A guard fired at movement along the camp perimeter, and in this morning, strange footprints were neither human nor ape were found, well as blood splattered along the first floor. The prints were photographed, and the creature was called Powell's ape, or a skunk, or maybe just a rock ape, named after the Deport Company commander. In 1982, more footprints were examined when Professor Teng Hung, Pedagogonic University of Hanoi, found them while collecting specimens. Choi Moroi District, the professor made casts of the prints, which measured 28.16, and long photos of these odd casts were later published. The Japanese Fortune magazine, Fortune News the World. Dr. Bernard Helms also wrote of curious prints in his opus On the Track of Unknown Animals, in which he recounted the tale of Lieutenant Alan Splitzer of Cumberland RI, who, while on a helicopter patrol of the 101st Airborne Division, spied some strange, huge footprints below. He would say, of what he say of what it was. Well, I had been looking at footprints from the air for quite a while, and I noticed the exceptional size of these. Immediately, I landed to get a closer look. And I found enough of these tracks were about 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. They were embedded deeply, indicating a heavy wearer. The stride of whatever made them was about 4 feet. The creature was estimated being perhaps 8 feet tall, based on the size of the prints and the length of stride. And just going to the signs of reports, this spoke of much larger specimens, even more impressive than the footprints of the rock apes, or actual bodies that have been claimed to have been found on occasion. In one case, described by Steve, so it was claimed that a veteran had told him of doing a nighttime low-altitude special force drop in the thick jungle interior of Vietnam in 67 through 68. 67. When after the group dropped, the team hear a low gurgling sound over a period of 3 nights. It was then claimed that on the 4th night they came across the torso decomposing Bigfoot-like creature, which had been horrifically blown apart by something, perhaps a landmine. Since the creature had been long dead, they surmised that what they had heard over the last 3 nights had perhaps been its mate mourning. Williams, account he says of the gruesome find, could see into the body cavity. Spine, lungs, such as all were crawling with bugs. There was a shorter hair on the huge head. The eyes were sunk back an inch and a half from the brow line. It had long arms, large and long fingers. One hand was still wrapped around a branch. The original source of the tail didn't say much what color it was, but did mention that it had a flat nose. The creature had its legs. The estimated height was around 8 feet tall. There was no sign of the lower half of the body. We're able to see the teeth had all flat, well-formed molars, except the canine, which were larger and pointed, seemed to have adapted to living in the forest with long arms and fingers. Perhaps just built night nests like gorillas. Another rather weird report published in the New York Times, April 18th. April 2010. A man named Grim Webster tells of a curious event that occurred in Sir Tracy Artillery Summer at the western end of the DMZ called the Rock Pile. One evening, sometime in 67, Marines from the 4th Marine Regiment were assaulted by a large number of rock apes, which were said to inhabit the caves of the area. The Marines were fought back in a prolonged burst of firepower, which lit up the night and the morning. There were allegedly corpses of the ape-like creatures strewn about, and they were included in the straight briefing body count. The incident seemed very much like a battle between Marines and rock apes that allegedly occurred in Hill 868. The Battle of 868. Dong Dan, Battle of 868, which also was claimed to have left bodies of the dead beasts in its wake. Hell 868, which also was claimed to have left bodies of the dead beasts in its wake. It is unclear what happened to any of these bodies in the aftermath. In addition, the bodies there have been even live rock apes allegedly captured, with the one notable report being the great pop-up. Just a moment. Maybe there. Claimed bodies in the aftermath. Notable report. Allegedly captured. One notable report being that 2 of the creatures were caught by tribesmen. Providence in 1971. Again, it is uncertain what became of these creatures, although considering it was wartime and most had been more serious issues weighing on their minds. Wonders if anyone ever actually went there to investigate the veracity of the claims at all. With all of these spectacular reports circulating around the Vietnam War, we are left to wonder just what the rock apes, or whatever one wants to call them, were. There are also a variety of theories that have been proposed over the years. Let me get this out of the way. With the most commonly being that what was seen was the token snub-nosed monkey, or Dalaman snub-nosed monkey, Vietnam's largest native primate species, and also highly endangered. It is also critically endangered, in fact, that it was long thought to be extinct until its rediscovery in 1989, although even now there were thought to be fewer than 250 of the animals left. Snub-nosed monkeys are found in southern China, Vietnam, parts of Myanmar, get their names from their flat upturned, in 1989, Jeez. Although even now there are thought to be fewer than 250 of the animals left. Snub-nosed monkeys are found in southern China, Vietnam, parts of Myanmar, and get their names from their flat, upturned noses. They live in remote mountainous forests in groups composed of up to 600 individuals. Several features seem to be point to the species as being perhaps the culprits. The token snub-nosed monkey are highly territorial and are known to show little fear at humans, which is indeed one of the reasons they have been so decimated by hunters. They also produce a wide range of vocalizations, including those which could be interpreted as sounding like the bark of a dog. Of the hallmark marks of rock ape reports. Nevertheless, there are several other reasons these monkeys are poor candidates for what was reported from the soldiers of Vietnam. First, it's the size, with the snub-nosed monkeys not being anywhere near 5 to 6 feet in depth stature, reported by the accounts of the rock apes. They also have very prominent tails, a feature not consistent with the tailless descriptions given by GIs, are furthermore not bipedal, which is a trademark of the rock apes. Further listing, therefore, there's a possible culprit is that the snub-nosed monkeys are less than the word is possible. The snub-nosed monkeys are diurnal, active in the day, whereas the rock apes is always referred to as a decidedly nocturnal animal. And additionally, the snub-nosed monkeys are arboreal, whereas the rock apes are mostly reported as foraging about the ground. Bipedal nature of the rock apes is also inconsistent with snub-nosed monkeys, as the reddish-brown coloring of the mysterious creature. Another theory is that there may be some other type of large undiscovered primate inhabiting the region. Maybe it is. What do you think, folks? We're having some fun here. By the way, hit that like button for me if you haven't, as well as please go share this video on social media. But what do you think, folks, before we continue on here? These sound very much like Bigfoot's reports, don't they? But yeah, in fact, what relation does Bigfoot have to these creatures, or what are they the same species? I mean, I've heard only humans really can be basically mainly because all these stories with wild men and rock apes all sound like Bigfoot, or the only real difference is with the snowman, the abominable snowman, having white fur. These sound exactly like Bigfoot stories with reddish brown fur or something like that. So why are Bigfoots basically sound all exactly the same all over the world, except for the abominable snowman and all that? But I find it very strange that everyone basically describes similar creatures. I think there'd be, they do say they have big, large bellies, so that could be something else. Maybe it's a different species. Or are they somehow related to each other? Are somehow Bigfoot's able to travel over to Vietnam for some wild region? Don't know, but it is interesting. I just want to say this in my piece like this before I continue on with this article. It's very interesting, these stories we're reading. Let's get back to this. Another theory is that they may be even some kind of other kind of creature that would fit in more with what was reported considering all the new species of mammal that have been discovered within the remote region in recent years. Certainly seems feasible that something like this could possibly remain hidden from the outside world. Theories suggest that the rock ape could represent some relic population of hominids or early humans and stuff. Wow, ancestors, early human. Yeah. Right. There are also those who have suggested sightings of these mysterious creatures are due to the imbibing of drugs. American soldiers, including the highly hallucinogenic LSD or acid, American soldiers by acid. However, most of these reports were made by troops that were on active duty, trained observers, and would probably not have endangered their missions and the lives of those around them by doing potent mind-altering drugs. There is also the fact that the strange creatures were seen probably just as often by the Viet Cong as they were by the Americans, and were well known by the local tribes. So we chuck up all these reports to both sides of the war, spending all their time in a drug-fueled insanity, or drug-fueled fever. Maybe drug-fueled fever. So what are we dealing with here? Were these mere reports of the results of misidentifications of very rare yet unknown primates? Is this all the product of minds addled by the stresses of war, drugs, or whatever? Or is there a chance that there is indeed some new species of ape lurking around these remote, isolated places? Basically, these apes hiding among, these apes disappearing among all the other large mammal discoveries here in recent years. If so, they are still out there. And what are they? Are they an ape or a form of surviving human ancestors? Something else entirely? Is this something similar to the orange pendak, human hominid of Asia? Or another Bigfoot of Asia and stuff like that, which is often touted as being one of the most plausible cases of strange hairy humanoid. Unfortunately, in times of war, there are more pressing issues. I'm not so sure about that than tracking down mystery beasts. I guess maybe I should say there is more important stuff. As a result, many of these reports were never really followed up on. To the men out there in the jungles, this was just one more struggle to add to those already in place with the forbidden terrain and the constant, there seems to be common reports and strange from war zones. Many such reported phenomena being lost in the mist of time, buried, lost my place. To the men out there in the jungles, this was one more struggle. This was just more struggle to add to those who were already in place within the forbidden terrain. The constant threat of attack. There seems to be a common with reports of strangeness from war zones, which such reported phenomena have become lost in the mist of time, buried beneath the violence and combat. It seems clear that as long as there is war, tales of bizarre will seep in along with the tales of horror. There's that as well, huh? Looked at the rock apes. Let's go look at how long we've been live streaming. I want to this 36 minutes in. Bianca fights the zombies. Aloha, dudes. Aloha, Bianca fights the zombies. Nice to have you check in and say hello. Have you guys hit that like button for me? If you have not yet, folks, please hit that like button. I love hearing from you guys, as well as leave me some comments so I can talk in some more. All right, let's see. Rock apes, wild men, mad monkeys on the attack. How many kinds of mysterious apes are out there? Ancient rock art carried by mysterious culture. Bigfoot and mysterious apes and wild men. What are they? What they use weapons? Or should I look at the maybe planned let's see. Champs have learned how to play rock. Let's go with Bigfoot, mysterious apes, wild men when they use weapons. 2016 article titled Mysterious Rock Apes, the Vietnam War. Brent Smusher wrote in part, American GIs began to come back with tales of something weirder than their enemy lurking in the forests of Vietnam. It seems that the Viet Cong were not the only thing to watch out for in the dense underbrush here. Foreign soldiers would come face to face with a creature that was well known by the locals, yet new to them, a humanoid, hairy biped, the likes of which none of them had ever seen. Would lurch forth from the deepest jungles to startle or even attack, and which would come to be known as the rock apes. As Brent's article demonstrates, there are more than a few reports of rock apes attacking military personnel. I mention this because today's article is in the matter of Bigfoot-like animal, wild men, anomalous apes using weapons, and the such, huh? January 1894 was the date from which the Dover, New Jersey press reported on the presence of a beast that doesn't exactly sound like Bigfoot, but equally does not sound like a normal man. Living wild, either in many respects, it seems to curiously stir both camps, as you will know. See, there is a wild man in the woods near Mine Hill, and through the parties that have been hunting for them for several days have often felt could in their heavy coats. The object of the search seems to get along uncomfortably with no more projection from the winter chill than an abundant set of whiskers. Said, huh? Or abundant set of hair. A number saw the creature, including a group of girls, Lizzie Crescent, and Kitty Griffin, and two woodsmen, Mike and Bill Dean. Well, Mike, huh? And Bill, huh? Okay, Mike and Bill Peterson. Yeah, the media report, Mike and Bill Williams. The media reported that Dean's endeavored to seize them. He picked up a club and burnished it in Talik's mine. One of the dogs, yeah, he picked up apparently the creature had a club on him and was using to defend itself. Bigfoot with a club. Ooh. The wood shot. Dog sprang at him and received a blow that nearly killed it. Yeah, the dog sprang at it and received a blow that nearly killed. The wood choppers then fled and telephoned from the company stored to the city for help. And so many such cases, the monster was soon gone. It was traveling south across South America in the 1960s that Count Bino de Turilla, an Italian explorer, first heard of a marauding monster on the continent. Of the information came from Turilla's personal guide, Antonio, who told of his shocking story. Some years earlier, Antonio and his two sons traveled to a particular range in Venezuela where they were confronted on the sprawling savanna. Enormous gorilla-like animals that were around 8 feet in height and had long arms and tiny heads. Not only that, they were armed with large and crudely fashioned wooden clubs. A violent altercation occurred. A massive range that covers parts of China, Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, and other places are home to a number of accounts of Bigfoot-like animal of both a stout and large stature. A particularly credible case that in 1925, General Mike Spinchinvich was leading a unit in search of a pocket of anti-Soviet guerrillas who were, hiding out somewhere in the western segment of the Premier Range. Were hunting down the guerrillas. Is also partly heard a number of stories from local villagers of creatures that dwelled in the most isolated regions of the mountains. Mountains, is in which display both human and ape-like qualities. In isolated regions, mountains, display both human and ape-like qualities. They were somewhat doubtful of the tales. That's at least until they came across human-like footprints negotiating decidedly treacherous snow-covered cliffs and slopes. Things really came to a head when Tarbuski and his men finally caught up with the guerrillas who were hiding out in a large cave. A firefight quickly and almost inevitably began, something which resulted in multiple deaths among the guerrillas, some by bullets and others by falling ice provoked by the fire. And among the survivors, however, was a man who told a strange tale of Tarbuski and his team. It was a story filled with descriptions of weird ape-like creatures that had attacked the guerrillas with clubs, one which the men said was killed on the ice fall. Telex was killed in the ice fall, huh? In 1933, a warrior named L.T. Merck of a Bigfoot-style monster roaming around Happy Village, Goose Bay, Labrador, Canada. 2 decades earlier, the specific location was the small town of Trevor's Bend. He said ghost stories are very real in this land. Scared, lonely homes, primitive fears. The Trevor Spine gorilla, one of the creepiest. About 20 years ago, one of the little girls was playing in an open grassy clearing one autumn afternoon, which saw coming out of the woods a hairy thing with low-hanging arms. It was about 7 feet tall when it stood erect, but sometimes it dropped to all fours. Across the top of its head was a white mane. Merrick continued, the dogs knew it was there too, for the family would hear them growl and snarl when it approached them. Often it must have driven them into the river, for they would be soaking wet in the morning. One night the dogs faced the thing. It lashed at them with a stick or club, which hit the corner of the house with such force it made the beams tremble. The old man and boys carried guns wherever they went, but never got a shot at it. For the 2 runners, it was there. The words wood woes, and one is one that has its origins in ancient England. Also a word steeped in mystery, legend that there is no solid consensus on its origins. wood woes, likelihood that it's derived from windu, from old word meaning forest and waza, or in today's terminology being in that sense the wood woes is a being of the forest, a hairy, wild humanoid of the woods, thing not at all unlike Bigfoot, Tabitha Cope, author of a number of books, including the Loch Ness Monster themed Darkness. Is someone who has carefully and extensively studied the mystery of the wood rose. Her research has shown that the wood rose was predominantly reported across England. 14th to the 16th century, it was most often described as large, a man-like beast, but one day that was covered in a coat of tight, curly hair. That was heavily bearded and that almost inevitably carried a large wooden club. At times, the wild wood rose would cover its body in ivy, moss, and leaves, possibly as a form of camouflage. On this same topic, English author and researcher Elizabeth Randall says the wood rose that it was actually usually shown as a complete part human figure carrying a club with the limbs being leafy. It also often shows a thick beard and wears a cap. The wood rose may also be shown holding the club in different positions. Sometimes this is at its side and sometimes it is raised. There is a theory that a raised club depicts the fear before it was converted to Christianity, but it probably more correctly believed that it was raised to ward off evil spirits. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Now, let's look at some more decidedly weird tales about wild men and apes. Creatures, strange tales of apes and population mystery beasts in Caroline folklore. Culture children may have created very rare miniature rock art using beeswax. Let's see. Bizarre reports of shape-shifting entities. There could be that these creatures are actual shapeshifters too. Now let's go over here. 46 minutes in, not too bad. Let's see. In the world of the paranormal, there are often reports of things which we cannot really offer any rational answers. Some things just seem to be firmly set within the realm of the truly hopeless, bizarre. Hopeless bizarre to find any attempt to even really guess at the answers. One area that really seems to dwell on this domain are the many reports of what seem to be mysterious shape-shifting entities that flow between forms, serve to it's wow. A very weird and such accounts come from a poster of Reddit called Mini Realities, and this is going to be good, huh? Who also seems to have a YouTube channel Paranormal Happenings. One of the people he spoke to had a very odd account of an apparent shape-shifting entity that apparently happened to her when she was 10 years old. On this day, she had been at her aunt's house, which was apparently located at the edge of the vast dark forest, which dusk came, and the daylight began to wane. She was out climbing a tree not far from her aunt's home when she reportedly saw something very large emerge from the trees. The poster says of her report thusly. She saw a young man wearing a lungi emerging from the woods. She came down and stared at him as she kept staring. The face of the features of the man changed, and he was transformed into one of her four uncles. She didn't realize that it was happening and started to call her uncle, but he never looked up at her and appeared lost. He kept walking around the edge of the woods, staring ahead, keeping a straight face. Some time later, the face changed again, and now he looked like another uncle of hers, then another, then her fourth uncle. She went back blank at this and could not hear the screams of her aunt from behind. She kept staring at the figure, which then took the form of a middle-aged man staring elongate and having a long beard. His chin, he kept walking around the edge of the woods, and now her aunt started to scream louder and started to pull her back to the house. It was at this point that she got goosebumps and started to run along with her aunt. When they reached home, her aunt told her that they saw to everyone. Told what they saw to everyone else that night. Her aunt and toddler got very sick, suddenly and almost stopped breathing. Being the family of pastors, they all started praying loudly. Yeah, this sounds like one of the Fairfolk as well. Like they met an elf or something, loudly putting hands on the baby, which made the baby scream unearthly. The baby could not be controlled, as if it had gotten an enormous strength from somewhere. They but kept praying, and gradually he fell quiet. My friend said that till this day, her cousin would stay weirdly quiet all the time. Yeah. What was this? Was this a ghost or something else, even more dramatic? Or shape-shifting accounts seem to describe people turning into animals or vice versa. There are actually quite a few such outlandish reports floating around. Such a report came from the phantoms from a witness called Miriam Pasby in Round Rock, Texas. The witness says that one evening she was out walking with her dorm friend one night, and they had come to a park near the campus to practice guitar. Yet, as they sat at a picnic table, peacefully storming away, something very weird would transpire. The witness says, "Night was falling, and I scanned the park around us. Lo and behold, about half a football field away, a creature skulked from behind some bushes, crossing a small space to disappear behind some other bushes. It was canine, but I can tell you now, it was not a recognizable dog to me. It was not shaped like a house dog, and it did not move like a dog. It was larger than a coyote. I had an impression of severe scruffiness. I could not see its face all clearly, only that it was a weird, creeping stomach low to the ground. Canine. I had never seen a silhouette like that, including wolves that I had seen in books and zoos, not much on TV, but at this point, a figure of a man emerged directly from behind the bushes into which the canine had skulked. Night had almost fallen, but I could see that he was very tall, had long, ratty, seeming hair, long, ratty beard. I could see his clothes were literally in tatters, and could see that his fingernails were very long, and hands that hung down by his sides. I could not see his eyes. He shambled, and I used that word correctly, implying some kind of walking disorder, directly towards us across the park. The canine did not reappear. I had heard no noises from the bushes at all, so I concluded he could not have been attacked by the canine, and in the few seconds they must have been met behind the same set of bushes. As he came closer, I saw ratty hair and beard, his long fingers and tattered clothing more clearly. Alarm bells were going off non-stop in my head. I said that we were seeing a werewolf and took off running, leaving my pal. She followed me. We ran out of the park back to the bustling streets. Finally headed for the dorm, we were crossing a very short crosswalk when I noticed that the old, athletic, grizzled white dog was slowly crossing from the other side. I looked at it as it passed right by me, and as I did all animals, and it stopped dead in its tracks, crouched awkwardly on all four legs, and stared directly into my eyes with totally blind eyes, milky white with no pupils. I stared back, and believingly, my heart was still thumping from running, and my mind was still shaky over all that had happened. And now it was still continuing with people and cars all around us. It craned its head to look over its shoulder at me, now turning its body around, still in this awkward, painful-looking four-leg crouching position. I looked away from it, and it headed for home. And it headed for home. People didn't notice this incident, stared at the dog and at me. At this point, I heard a horn blaring and wheeled back to see that a car had driven right up to the crosswalk, and she's away with the lights full on the dog, and it was honking and its horn to move it out of the road. It did not seem to notice the car, the lights, or the horn. It just squatted, and it was still staring after me. People were standing and staring at the dog. Truly bizarre simile. We have the shape-shifting dog story, a red poster called Ground Ball, who says that this happened at a place called Canyon on Navajo Reservation in Arizona. He was at the reservation to visit the mother of his friend Jenny, and on their 17th, they decided to go off to a rug auction. The auction itself went on a bit too long, and the two decided to leave at around 9 p.m. I know I was going to talk about wild men and stuff like that, but I figured I'd look at this story too, because as I've said before, maybe Bigfoot is a shapeshifter. The road back to the Hunt house was simple, a two-lane after affair, though scrub surrounded by canyons and utter blackness of night. It was a remote, rugged area far from civilization. They all became lost to their thoughts as the lane flickered past. Flickered past in the headlights. That was when something caught the witness's attention. He says, "That's when I noticed the dog. At first, it was just a flash of white in corner of my vision. Then I craned my neck and got a good look at it. A big white German Shepherd was running parallel to our car, 100 yards off the road, and little behind us. Something about it made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Knew we must have been going 40 to 45 miles per hour. Was being honest. I could feel my heart pick up while I stared at it. As it came perpendicular to us, it began to draw up on its front feet until it was running on two legs like a human. It turned its head to look at my stomach, dropped even more from the distance. Sure, I could see a red glint in its eyes, and a feeling of dread washed over me. I must have made a noise because Jenny touched my leg and asked what was wrong. I glanced at her wordlessly and then gestured at the window, but as I turned back, the dog was gone. Not wanting to scare her, I told her the dark it was playing tricks on me, closed my eyes, determined to sleep the rest of the way home. The next night, after I looted food and even more visiting, I had to hold up in my room to get ready for bed. I was staying on the second floor of my house, and my window overlooked the street. The houses are fairly spread up, but the road is lined with street lamps, the nearest of which was less than a block away. The opposite side, I turned out my light and went to the window to pull down the shades of the light when it come me up. Fear hit me like a sucker punch. Eyes drifted across the road. In the light of the street lamp was the German Shepherd. It was standing on its hind legs in a way that I knew canine animals should not be able to do. It was staring straight back at me from that close. It was obvious that it had deep red eyes, fur that was a yellowish white. I didn't know how long we watched each other. I knew better than to stare at it in the eyes, but I was too terrified to turn away. Finally, it dropped down to all fours, walked away as I slept with enough next to my bed in the bedroom door that night. Well, he kept his door shut that night and basically, made sure it was shut and would not open that night. All right. The witness goes on to explain that he believes that it was a type of shapeshifter, which was called a skinwalker. Another had certainly reported along these lines was posted by Radiator Blazette, who was at the same time driving on Highway North 97 south of Mount Shasta along with a friend. It was reportedly around midnight, and the pair were riding through a heavily wooded area without any street lamps and completely dark. The drive had been mostly uneventful, but that was about to change, the witness says. We rounded a corner when I saw something fast and low to the ground, darted across the street around 50 to 60 yards ahead of us. I saw the glowing animal's eyes and a body that was the size and shape of a big dog. We saw animals the whole road trip, and like usual, I asked my wife if she saw it too, and she confirmed the body wasn't 100% clear. Our headlights hadn't reached that section of the road yet. When we got to the exact point in the road where the animal crossed, we looked to the side to see if there was anything there. There was a man dressed in army fatigues walking down the road. He didn't look at us. He just kept walking. It was pitch black, and he didn't have any type of light with him. He was only lit up by our headlights. We both got full body chills when we saw because we were expecting to see an animal. I know that area has a magical mystery history with a lot of unexplained signs. Is unlike anything I've ever experienced before. We were fully creeped out. Reddit user Hamad said in a word experience, he told us, a child, he says that his siblings all share the same room in a bed. Were in a bed for the night when he woke up suddenly and without warning in a pitch black room. He says that he was drawn by a compulsion to go to the window, peer through it into the night outside where he saw something that he was never forgotten. The witness reports. Saw a massive black dog, at the road, directly under the seemingly only straight length that was working. As I was staring at the dog, it turned its head towards me, and I saw it had red eyes. It stared directly back at me, what I felt like before, turning the face again, head again. Then the street lamp flickered and went out, and I could no longer see the glowing of his eyes. No more than a minute later, the street lamps returned, and in place of the dog was a short, now a very tall man, 7 feet tall, all features completely obscured by darkness, aside from one thing, red eyes. Looked directly at me for ages before he walked away. As he walked down the road, though, he gradually hunched over more and more. He turned back into the large dog. It is going on here. Yeah. What do you think, folks? What is going on here? Who knows? There are several reports involving a cougar-like entity. One comes from Poster Paranormal, who was working at a summer camp along with some friends. At the time of the free time, they would often go hiking and exploring around the area. And on this day, he was a friend named Tyler going along in a trail of beautiful, clear weather. The witness says of what happened next. After working, we took an hour or two off to hike some trails. Tyler and I went down to a trail alone. The sun was shining through the trees as we crossed a bridge to a creek. A nice and peaceful break. You would think that there would be a lot of noise in the forest as we hiked, but the only noises that were made were our own shoes hitting the dirt. It was eerily silent. Tyler and I went over a small hill and came down, and that's when we heard the sound of rustling leaves to our right. We both froze, looked over to see a huge figure coming down a hill. Leaves as it stepped to catch itself from tumbling downhill. First glance, it looked like a boy with white t-shirt, shorts, and Nicholas, which was very confusing because we were only once at the camp. A couple of seconds into the fall, it started to look like a mountain lion, which was common at the camp. The figure seemed to change as it went down the hill, which I couldn't explain. Tyler and I stopped to look at each other briefly. After it had passed out of sight, we were over the hill to better look at. Nothing was there. It was gone. Tyler got on the walkie-talkie to tell our group that he saw something, but when he was asked what it was, didn't have an answer. I pressed him on it too, and he had no idea what that was. It was very bizarre because it wasn't more than 40 feet from us. Would be one thing if I saw it and couldn't put my finger on it. Tyler saw it too, and we didn't have an answer either. Perhaps even more bizarre comes from Reddit. Poster him in his encounter with some sort of shape-shifting creature that defies every characterization. Was a nice evening, and he and a group of friends had gone down to a supermarket to do some skateboarding in the parking lot, which is described as being very well lit. And while they saw something very odd, which would quickly evolve into the flat-out bizarre, he says, "What happened?" We're skating around and we just playing around in general when one of my mates spotted a rabbit. Being curious teens, we began chasing through the car park, which I may add lit very brightly to the street lamps. As we were chasing it, I shit you not, this thing changed into a cat. Still kept chase as we obviously thought we were seeing things, which we were. Then it changed into what obviously looked like a fox to us. May I remind you that this place was lit up and we could see it clear as day when my mate stopped chasing as he was confused, and understandably so. Just before this thing got to a nearby shrubbery, the other mate who was still chasing me with me stopped and said, "What the F?" That the thing had literally turned into a cougar-like cat about 3 feet high, slowed down from its running, sprinted to a walking pace, and looked back at us slowly, walking to the shrubs. Promptly went home. Whatever that was, it went from a small rabbit a foot wide to a huge predator cat. I wish I had answer. Well, I wish I had answers. I wish I had something. Yeah. Wow. Predator cat, huh? A big mountain lion. Let's see, it turned into a cougar. Here we just take a peek into the many stories that are out there concerning these shape-shifting entities that prowl the dark corners of the world. It's hard to really know what to think of such reports. Firmly lie on the very fringes of the world of the paranormal. Yeah, what are they? What could they possibly be? Is Bigfoot or any of these ape creatures shapeshifters as well? It would certainly explain why we've never been able to get a body of them, have we? I mean, they did say that the government took bodies of them, but is that actually true? If these guys are shapeshifters, it would be easy for them to just disappear and basically reappear as a human. So we would never actually get them. Let's go over here. WizGiz. Damn, man, you were up late. WizGiz. Hell, Bianca Zombie. Is there a new segment you're doing? This reminds me of so much of the new 6 Comics campaign, The Naturals. Well, cool. 237 subs. Congrats on the good work. Thank you, man. I know. I know. I made a lot of subscribers. But I'm basically doing a new segment where I talk about supernatural stuff. That's really my bread and butter. I always love to do this stuff. I'm still doing comic books and stuff like that. Basically mentioning in my live streams now, WizGiz. But basically, this is what I've been doing nowadays by basically talking about supernatural stuff because I really think it helps. The Cryptonaturals is a book out there as well, folks. It's basically a book talking about weird things, stuff like that. So you should check it out. Now, folks, if you haven't yet, please go hit that like button for me, will you, folks? Because it really helps me fight the algorithm. All right. It would really help me if you could, if anyone is watching this, hit that like button for me, will you? As well as please go share this video on social media. Now, I've been looking at this, basically talking about different ape creatures from around the world, and I just looked at this article about shapeshifters. I really like that. Rock apes and wild men, mad monkeys on the attack. Should I look at this one, folks? Maybe look at, I looked at the Bigfoot, apes, and wild men who use weapons as well. I'll look at that tonight. Basically, these creatures are maybe smart enough to basically use tools as well. That's if they are just animals. But then again, they could also be something so much more than just mere apes and stuff like that we know as Bigfoot. It could be something so much more. Let me go over here now. Let's see this. UFO ship brought to China. It's let's see this. Let me go over here. Let's see. I'm doing pretty well tonight. I'm going to end my live stream in the next few minutes, I suppose. I can probably find maybe a few more articles, but I pretty much said my piece here. Maybe I'll come back and, maybe I could continue with this live stream, look at a few more stories, I suppose. But maybe I should just end it tonight, huh? We talked about shapeshifters, and we talked about different wildman stories from different parts of the planet. We even talked about how these creatures might even be able to use clubs. So we did good. So please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, okay? And my YouTube channel, the name of my channel is Read Comics They're Bad For You, okay? The there is misspelled, though, so you should know that. Let's see. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that like button for me because it helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please go share this video on social media, as well as hit that bell, will you? Yeah. Share this video on Facebook and Twitter, and hit that bell, and make sure to hit the part of it that tells you to get all future notifications, okay? As well as please leave some comments down below. As well as please go and please go and subscribe to Stitch Together Picks. Stitch Together Picks is a YouTube channel that is hosted by a great host. You're going to love his reviews of movies. As well as go over to Creepy Little Book another YouTube channel that deserves far more subscribers. It's hosted. He releases small videos and stuff like that, but he also live streams every night. He live streams on weekdays and on weekends, so go and subscribe to Creepy Little Book. He talks about aliens and ghosts, as well as go over to Rumble and subscribe to my Rumble channel. As I just go over to Rumble and check out just search out Comic Freak. It'll take you to my channel and subscribe to it and stuff like that, as well as go over to BitChute and subscribe to my BitChute channel. It is also named Comic Freak. All right, folks, I'll be back again tomorrow. But before I go, could you guys hit that like button for me? It really helps me fight the algorithm. In fact, maybe I will do this real quick to make sure. Do this right here. We had some fun tonight, huh? We talked about different wildman stories and stuff like that. And maybe tomorrow I'll talk even more weird stuff, and we'll have even more fun. So be sure to come back again then. All right, let me do this. Whoops. Let me do this right here. Thank you for hitting that like button, folks. It really helps me. All right, folks. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. If anyone wants me to go, I can continue a bit longer if you guys want me to. Just leave me a chat saying you do. I'd love to hear from you guys. Because I got 5 people here already. That gives me that really makes me want to look at some more Wildman stories. So maybe I should go look at this. Wildmen. Let's do a look at this. Bigfoot and Wildmen, a new book reviewed. Bigfoot, Mrs. Wildman. That's Wildmen in American History, Feral Humans, Monsters and Mythology. This is going to, because folks, back in the 1800s, they didn't mention that people were seeing Bigfoot. They called the Bigfoot encounters Wildmen. So they basically news stories and actual newspapers would mention Wildmen instead of Bigfoots. So basically, the stories got confused with such things as basically mountain men and stuff like that, or just guys who basically live in the mountains or just live in the wilderness. They got confused with those guys, basically meaning that people thought they were just regular people or regular men who were basically living by themselves out in the woods, when anyone would basically encounter a wild man. But in reality, a lot of these stories, a lot of people think, well, but in these new stories, these people weren't encountering humans, but were encountering Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Let's see. It was described as a half man, half beast. This year it was 1871, and in the country of Biggs, Pennsylvania, whatever it was, had been on the loose for weeks, keeping locals awake at night with animalistic screams. Reports of the creature made it to newspapers in the region, first going to print the Reading Eagle and eventually even appearing in the New York Times. About 2 weeks ago, a man presenting the appearance of a huge overgrown bear made his appearance on the Welsh mountain directly opposite the village of Morgantown and made the night hideous with its, hideous beast-like howling. Let's see. The descriptions sensational, to say the least. The hair on his head hang down. Descriptions were sensational, to say the least. The hair on his head hang down his back. Description reads, describing his face as being very nearly covered with long, bushy hair, giving him the appearance of a gorilla more than a human being. Locals were reportedly so frightened by the appearance of Burke's Country's Thing. Entire groups of men armed with guns, clubs, and other weapons went in search of the nighttime prowler. Men were deploying in squads, read, and at times the yells from their half man and half beast were so close to them that they thought it utterly impossible for him to escape. Though escape, the fiend certainly did, and time again with each of the invasion, Pennsylvanians grew more concerned by its presence in the region, of which they were constantly reminded each night. The same doleful howling re-echoed through the valleys bordering the mountain. Dogs howl and cry as soon as night approaches. The report reads, describing how the beast was occasionally seen on his hands and feet, moving along the flatness of Another account refers to the creature harassing horses, cattle, ran and refused to eat as if some demon was after them. At its most sensational report, the story fit it well alongside scenes from the 70s drive-in theater double features, lakes of the creature from Black Lake, and other Bigfoot movies. And of course, a glance at it sounds very much like the 70s account is relatively relating an encounter with Sasquatch. However, as is often the case, is more to the story. A few days since he was seen and filled back in the village, a number of citizens started the pursuit to overtake him. The New York Times reported on 30th, 1871, of the alleged half-man, half-beast, the wild man, and they say, because every report back then in a newspaper would call this creature they encountered wild man, and basically would make people think they actually just encountered a regular human, not something like a Bigfoot. As it turns out, the culprit was far more than beast. It was taken into the nearby hotel by Mr. D.K. Blank. He was later interrogated and reportedly identified himself as one Thomas Forley, Irishman who had been roaming the forest for nearly 2 years. When caught, he was very nearly in nude state. Oh. So this is one of those reports where they actually encountered someone who was actually nutty, who was wandering around the woods for a few years. No, this is new. Here I thought we were actually talking about a Bigfoot encounter. It was reported the locals reportedly gave him a bare clothing, but upon his release, he immediately started for the mountains. Tearing his clothes into strips, he moved along, reverting back to his more wild and primitive state. Sensational accounts of wild men like this were rife in the 19th century, though not all of them are quite as clear in whether the subject was to be taken for being human. October 1869 report tells of a pair of men who had been hunting South Romestown. Well, they found a creature about 5 feet high, resembling a man in form and movement, but covered all over with bright red hair, having a long, staggering beard, very wild eyes. When first seen, the creature sprang from behind a rocky cliff and started for the woods nearby. When mistaking it for a bear or other wild animal, one of the men fired. The account reads, believing it to have been wounded. The creature then came at the men, reported to lost their guns and ammunition in the fight, and dared not return for fear of encountering those strange beings. Stories being more credible than the wild men of Pennsylvania from the earlier report. A story that's from an earlier report, although there was an interesting addendum to it. The account given by the two young hunters, it was reported that years prior to the incident, a strange animal had been seen in the vicinity of Vermont's Going Mountain Range. Was man-like in appearance, but so wild that no one could approach it near enough to tell what it was, where it dwelt. People in the old days reportedly sent hunting parties out in search of the creature. If we were to suppose that for a moment that such 19th century oddities were laying true events, it invariably leaves us with the task of interpretation. Obviously, the first story tells us of a man from Ireland chose to live a feral life in the wilderness, could still have simply been a wild yarn that made it to print. It at least has plausible threads. However, the second case tells of what appeared to be a man, but was described covered all over with bright red fur, despite possessing otherwise man-like features. In terms of size and shape, obviously this sounds somewhat more like a modern conception of Sasquatch. Well, conception of Bigfoot. Albert little. What are we to make of this report like this? Do such stories indicate that there actually were more people out that chose to live under feral conditions, as we might say today, off the grid? The years following the American Civil War, could they simply be tall tales, the like of which often prevalent in newspapers during their period? There seems a very likely possibility. If so, what does it say about the mindset of people in that era and the interests of people who had taken back to living in the natural state? Yeah. Cite all of the psychological interpretations, but are interested in these reports. Relationship to modern reports of creatures like Sasquatch or Bigfoot is quite apparent. Also interesting for a few other reasons. While much could be said about this, the primary argument is that much like sightings of airships from the 1890s, some see as cultural predecessors to modern reports of UFOs. Articles about alleged wild men in North America, at very least, we seem to have a similar relationship to modern reports of Bigfoot. Yeah, it could be as well. It should further be noted, and despite arguments to the contrary, various scholars of publications, as I address it in a moment, that plenty of descriptions exist from the 19th century and early 20th century, which detail bipedal ape or gorilla creatures in North America. Often one will see the erroneous argument being made that there had been no explicit descriptions of Bigfoot as an ape-like creature prior to the late 1950s, after a Canadian hunter named William Moe, when Bigfoot began to make a big splash in newspapers, largely resulting from the acts of Ray Wallace, pranks he had been undertaking in Big Creek, California. Yeah. These stories that go back centuries. They may have been described as wild men, but clearly a lot of these stories were describing Bigfoot. So you get the idea that these stories go back centuries. Well, that people have been seeing this for centuries. It's up to you. I'm just listening and hanging out while multitasking and doing some work. Thank you, WizGiz. Thank you for leaving another chat. But I think now I'll end my live stream now. So please go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, folks. Will ya? Please hit that like button for me. Leave some comments down below. Remember, my channel is Read Comics. They're bad for you. Hit that bell for me, as well as hit that part where hit the part where you get all notifications for all my future videos. Share this video on Twitter and Facebook, and please leave some comments down below. I'll be back again tomorrow for another live stream. So I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel, folks. Thank you all for joining me.